So my next guest is Stuart Elliott, and Stuart is a mindset specialist and confidence coach. He's a Brit and he lives in the south of China and runs a company called Double C Coaching. We had a great conversation about his time settling into China, running a business, the cultural differences that came up during that time, how he helped his wife give birth to their child using some hypnotherapist techniques, which was very interesting, and some of the criteria that he thinks are important for people when they're selecting a coach to work with. Let's have a listen. This is the Expat Business Hero podcast, and I'm your host, Alex Congdon. So hi, Stuart. Welcome to the show.
Yes. Hi, Alex. Thank you again for inviting me. It's wonderful that you've given me this opportunity to share some stories and bits and pieces with your audience.
You're absolutely welcome. Just remind me again, where exactly in China are you right now? Where is the actual province?
I'm not sure if you are aware of the geography of China, but I'm about 4.5 hours north of Vietnam in a place called Guilin. It's a very picturesque tourist type area. Lots of mountains, wonderful scenery, and the subtropical part of China.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, before we get started, I want to have a bit of fun. We had a little bit of a quiz just to warm things up. So, rapid fire question. Okay. 5 questions, rapid fire. Would you or wouldn't you? These are bizarre foods to eat in China.
I think I have to sort of pre-warn you. I am a vegetarian.
Okay. Well, this is going to be. Well, there is. There we go. Let's see how we go. So, tuna eyeballs.
I've never actually seen that in China, in this part of China, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I've seen students of mine eating just ordinary fish, carp or catfish eyeballs, and I think it's disgusting, but I've never seen them with tuna eyeballs.
Okay. Here's another one, which sounds like it could be vegetarian. Bird's nest soup.
Bird's nest soup, it doesn't do anything for me. I've seen it, we've had it, but, the thought of eating someone's vomit or spit, no.
Chicken testicles.
And you know how expensive it is. It's crazy.
It's a delicacy. Number 3, chicken testicles.
Chicken testicles, no. Even if I was eating meat. I mean, I was in a restaurant with some people and the brother of the friend came in a little bit late and says, I've just eaten 20 chickens' asses. And he was so proud of himself. And we just looked at him and thought, there's something wrong with this guy.
All right, here's one.
No.
Doesn't do it for you. All right. Here's one for the vegetarians. Stinky tofu.
Cho tofu, no.
It's like a fermented tofu.
I know cho tofu, and it smells like something's died on the street. Apparently, the smell is worse than the taste, but no. I've never ventured it. I've been walking past the stores and giving them a wide berth.
Final one, and I think I know the answer. Snake soup.
Snake soup, it's not that offensive, should we say. But no, I wouldn't. I'm not really interested in snakes. I've been in markets where there's snakes crawling around in bowls with nets over them and stuff like that, and people pull them out. But the funniest thing, close to snakes, was I was in a restaurant which was a famous snake restaurant, and they had on the table this big black cauldron, and it was like Macbeth, the 3 witches. The people have got their chopsticks, they come in from a high height and they put them in the cauldron, you can't see what's inside. Then they fish around and they come out with a small snake. Another person comes out with a small lizard, and then they eat it, and there's a turtle or 2 in there as well. So I was just looking and I thought, I'm not interested. No way.
Thank you. I think you just got through that one.
Thank you.
Well,
would you try it?
No, I think I'll pass on all 5 of those.
Okay.
I want to go straight in and ask you then. So if there were one thing that I would want to have for my children to have after their schooling, it would be to have great confidence, confidence to take on life as they set out. How do you go about building confidence and how can it transform how you live your life?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to understand is that the system, the education system, everything else is focusing on mistakes. And this makes people very scared. You get your homework book back, there's red lines through it, there's crosses and everything else. And all the emphasis is on what you can't do. And that to me is totally wrong. If you focus on what you can do and understand that there are some things that you still have to learn, then that can give you more confidence. I'll give you an example. My daughter, she's just over a year old now, and about 11 months of age, she decided she could stand up on her own. She couldn't get off the floor. She had to crawl, pull herself up by the side of the playpen. But the first thing she did when she realized this was she applauded herself. And she shouts, "Yay!" And she was so happy because now she knows she can do it. And, how many people do we see actually recognizing something they've achieved? We don't. Most people are conditioned not to do that. So this is another thing which is draining their confidence because they're not recognizing how good they are. So what I would do is work with the people to start recognizing and build a list of all the things they've achieved. I mean, writing. Do you realize actually how difficult it is to write and to use all the little fine controls of your motor skills and then the thought impulses and everything else just to draw the small A and get it on the right place in a piece of paper? Never mind the big A or the B or the C or whatever, but we don't think about it. We don't recognize that that is a major achievement in our life. So we just dismiss it. Everybody can write. It's nothing special. And this is how we go through our lives. And each time we're doing something like that, we're slowly degrading our ability to appreciate what we actually can do, which means we know we can do more and more and more and more, and that gives us the confidence to go forward.
Is there a particular approach that you use? Because I know this is something that you work on with some of your...
Well, the first thing is to get people to start writing down. Number one, what is good about them? Can they tell me 10, 20 things which are good about them off the top of their head? Most people get stuck about 10, 15. If I say, give me 100 bad things, no problem. We can just rattle them off forever. So I want them to start writing down on a piece of paper, not on their phone or on the computer, but on a piece of paper, 100 things which are good about them. Then once it got past 100, go to 100, go past 110 or 120. It might take you a few days, it might take you a few weeks, but don't worry. But the reason I want them to have a physical piece of paper is so they can fold it up and put it in their pocket. And then they can feel the goodness because it's bulky. They can feel the goodness in them, all the time. And similarly with this, write a success diary. All the things you've succeeded at today. And you'd be surprised how that makes you feel when anytime you're a little bit down, you open it and just see all these successes, you see all these good things. It makes you feel like you are special after all, and this puts a smile on your face. So those are a couple of the things. There's a lot more little tricks which seemingly so innocent, but they build, and they make you feel more special.
Is there something in our brains that makes us focus on what went wrong? Why are we wired like this? It's very odd, isn't it?
Well, I would suggest it's not that we're wired like this, that we're conditioned like this from a young age. How many times do parents tell the children, don't do that, you're stupid. You can't do that, you're stupid. How many times do we get that message from school? How many times do we get that from society? Children are born with, generally with a good sense of intuition. And they can see things that we can't see, and they can imagine things. They can have conversations with strangers in their mind and play with them. And then they get told they're stupid for doing that type of thing. There's an interesting book which I read by Maxwell Maltz, Dr. Maxwell Maltz, called Psycho-Cybernetics. It's got many, real stories and things like that. But the one that stands out at this particular time was a young child who was at home when his teacher visited his parents, and he was supposed to be asleep, but as young children do, he was on the stairs listening in. And he heard the teacher say to his parents that, Johnny is no good at maths. He needs to go in a lower class because he's useless at maths. So the two people, or the two sets of people who were his major role models in life at that age, both agreed that he was stupid. So what happened? He became stupid. And he stayed that way as the dunce of the class for a long time. And then for some reason, one day, the teacher put a problem on the board. And this guy, well, firstly, he asked everybody in the class if they could solve the problem. Nobody could solve it. And this guy, for some reason, he could see the answers clearly as daylight. And he put his hand up, me, I can do it. And then they all laughed at him. The teacher laughed at him. We can't do it. How can you use, the most stupid math student here? And he got so angry that he ran to the board and he wrote everything on the board exactly perfectly correct. But he was astounded. And from that moment on, he became the top of the class because now he believed in himself. He hadn't got this identity that he was useless because he just proved it was wrong. So I don't think it's something we're wired. I think it's something that's conditioned into us, to be honest with you.
And
I mean, if you've seen young children, we need to uncondition it. And society is very challenging to take away that conditioning. But if you've seen a young child, have you ever seen a young child doubt that it can walk? Have you ever seen a young child doubt that it can talk or do any of the things that they do? It's only us which put the doubts in the brain.
Now you've brought another aspect into the practice, which you told me before about, and that's hypnosis. So this is an interest of yours, but you actually bring this into your practice with your clients, and how do you use this?
Yeah, well, hypnosis is basically, I wouldn't say hacking use of a normal state that we go into, which is a trance state. And, a very good example of that is your driving. You don't consciously do all the things you do when you're driving. You leave it to your unconscious because your unconscious is designed to do all these things, to run the show. Your conscious mind can only handle 5 to 7 bits of information at one time. It's not its job. So all we're doing is we're helping people to access the unconscious and to, do the different things. And, there's so many different forms of hypnosis and so many ways that people use it. But I'll give you an example. Just recently, was it the Duchess of Kent had the baby? I can't remember the royal family's name, but she had the baby.
Louis, yeah.
Yeah, Louis, okay. But she used what they call hypnobirthing. And that's basically using hypnosis and self-hypnosis to help her, get in touch with her body and direct the energy in the right places, etc., etc. So the birth, goes a lot more smoothly. And I used hypnosis when my baby was born, with my wife. And we decided beforehand that we wanted a natural birth. We practiced I practiced the hypnosis with her and got her to get used to going into self-hypnosis. And then when we were in the hospital, when the labor really started, I went into the delivery room with her, and we were there for over 3.5 hours, and I was in a trance. And this is so funny because I was stood there in a plastic bag. Okay? I've got a plastic hat on, I've got a mask on, and I've got these plastic shoes on. And it's warm, and the nurse is, and no one can speak English apart from me and my wife. And the nurse is saying to Susan, my wife, does he want the air conditioner on? It's hot. And I didn't even feel hot, but there was perspiration everywhere. But I was in a trance myself, and I was connected to Susan by this invisible thread. And I said, it's up to you. You choose. You're the one who's doing all the work. You're the one who's, got no clothes on and everything else. It's your choice. It's nothing to do with me. And we went through about 3.5 hours of labor. And, to cut a long story short, the nurses had given up and were preparing for a cesarean. Susan, I said, it's her choice. It's not my choice. You decide what you want to do. But when she had a particularly painful contraction and she was shaking her head and trying to get her breath back and everything else, all I said was, breathe. And then she started breathing naturally. And I said, that's right. And now you can direct the fresh energy. And I was just using the hypnotic language and the actual intent. But what was so remarkable was, number one, that she started breathing normally within a split second. It was like a light switch. But more importantly, the baby's heartbeat dropped straight down to normal from being really, high at that same instant. So it helped to go back into that place and take control. And I said to her, you've got control. You can take that fresh energy. And, everything just worked. It was, a particularly difficult labor because it was our first child, Susan's first child. And but it was a natural birth with no chemicals, no drugs, no nothing, just hypnosis and her. So it's very, very rewarding. And to go back to your original question, I use what I would term conversational hypnosis. And that's where I'm talking to someone and I'm not trying to manipulate them or anything else, but I'm just putting them in a resourceful state, a place of resource, a place of goodness. And then once they come from a place of resource, it's amazing how problems can't exist. Because problems don't exist. They're just solutions waiting to be found. And that's not my statement. That's somebody else's statement. But it's a very, very true statement. And if you look at any problem or any challenge, should we say, because I don't like the word problem, as coming from a place of resource, it's much more empowering than saying, "Oh, I can't do that," because you tell yourself you can't, you're right. You tell yourself you can, you're also right. You have that choice.
Now, you're doing this from your base in China, which is an incredible kind of business to run from there. But tell us the story about how you ended up in China, because that's quite a journey you took.
Well, when I can't remember what age it was back in 86, so 29, that's right. So when I was about 29, I decided to go on an overland trip through Africa, from southern Africa back to the UK. And it was a 6-month trip. We went with a group of people on a truck, and we had a wonderful time. I spent a month in South Africa. My brother was living there at the time. And then we got back to England, and I looked around and I said, I don't like this. And then I just made a plan right there and then to go back to South Africa. Now, I had a house in the UK, which we'd rented before, actually to one of the famous Manchester United football players. But he was only renting it for 6 months. And then, we moved back in and we sold the house. And then I got a ticket to South Africa. And just the day before the that I was supposed to fly, the house sale fell through. But I said, stuff this, I'm still going, because what am I going to do? So I went flew out to South Africa, landed there, and then I found the job fairly easily. But I couldn't get a visa for 3 or 4 months after I had the job, so I had to stay there and just wait for them to go through the legal procedure for the visa, which meant making sure there was no local people who could do the work I was doing. And I was doing telecommunications, microwave radio at the time. That was my field. And then I stayed in South Africa. I got married, and my ex-wife and we had a business, landscaping, garden maintenance. And she started it, then I joined with her. And then after several years, we ended up getting divorced, which, sometimes happens. But I would suggest, for me, it was the best thing that could happen. Even at the time, I wouldn't tell you that. But it was, I've learned so much from that experience. And then I had my side of the garden maintenance landscaping business, but I just lost interest. And then I found some work with a friend of mine who was making subblowers for boilers, and I started programming PLCs. And at the same time, I wasn't happy. I just didn't feel comfortable. And then I had 2 dogs who both died. And at the same time, I was offered a chance to go to China to teach English. So my first question was, where, north or south? And they said, no, it's about 3 hours from Vietnam in the south of China. I said, no problem. So they gave me a ticket, to Guangzhou, which is about 2.5 hours flight from where I was supposed to be. And I said, well, how am I supposed to get from there to Nanning, the city I was being picked up at? He says, no, there'll be somebody there to meet you. I said, okay, fine. So I got on the plane and went through to Guangzhou and got off the plane. And what I found out at that time was I had an hour to get off an international plane, to find this guy, to get to the domestic departures, get my baggage, go through immigration, and then carry on to Nanning. But, let's just go. I'm not interested in it. It's going to work. I didn't even have any doubts about it not working. And there's a guy there with his little piece of paper, and Stuart Elliott is going there. And I say, it's me. And he says, come. And he's off like a rocket, And, I'm glad he was there, because at that time, the domestic airport and the international airport was separated by a food market, a vegetable market. And I would never have found my way through at that time. And I'm following him. He's like a little rat scurrying through the sewers, because he knew how, tight the time was. And we get to the check-in desk, he says, bye-bye, and he's gone again. So I got on the plane, and then I flew to Nanning, and people were meeting me there, and then we had a 2-hour drive to the city I was staying at. And I only intended to stay there for 1 year. 13 or 14 years later, I'm still here. So something, is comfortable.
So at what point did you decide then to set up this coaching business, and why did you set it up?
Well, what I found was teaching English was rewarding. I was a good teacher, and I was very popular as a teacher. But I became more and more comfortable with the older students at 25. So And they would they were sometimes in private classes where it was a one-on-one. And if they had a high enough level of English, they would share their problems with me, and I would help them to solve the problems. And that became more and more rewarding than teaching a class, English as a second language. And I just decided that, number one, I didn't fit into the restrictions of the employment scene over here because, I'm not that type of person. And number two, the rewards were much better when I saw someone make a change. And, that was the most wonderful feeling in the world. So it became natural for me to decide to just pursue that field. However, having said that, I'm in China and I don't speak fluent enough Chinese to work with people who can't speak English. So I have to do it internationally.
Which is a downside, but also an opportunity at the same time.
Yeah, the downside is you can't network face to face. You have to go on platforms like LinkedIn or whatever. And obviously, the other downside is that Facebook and Google and many other platforms that people take for granted are just not accessible within China because of the government restrictions. So we have to find ways and means around it. But, where there's a will, there is a way.
Was that the hardest thing about setting up the business, the language piece?
I would think so because, I haven't set up a business per se within China. I did it in Hong Kong where they could speak English. And, the other side of the coin is that if you want to work within China and work in a company, like you have to have a particular, work visa and a work permit to work there, because there's a danger that you might displace, the local people. So, there's all the legal side of businesses, which, can get very complicated. And then, another issue is banking, because the banks over here don't have much English. So banking, can be quite tedious. Have to get a translator if anything goes wrong, which, it does go wrong with banks, unfortunately. And that becomes a challenge on its own. So there's a lot of stuff, but, language is my fault at the end of the day that I'm not as fluent in Chinese as I could be because I got lazy. And, I need to change that so that I can, fit in much better within the country and help more people locally.
How about the whole community and the networking and the connections locally?
Well, I have to do that online, and I'm finding it easier. Especially with LinkedIn, there's a lot of people there. Whenever I'm able to go overseas, I can network with people like that. But I think LinkedIn is a very good tool because there's 500 million users, and I can choose which countries I work with. Whether they're English speaking or whatever. And you can choose people by there. If you want to, you can use paid advertising, but you can also do a lot, with just the profiles and connecting with people and, bits and pieces like that. So I'm working more with LinkedIn than anything else. The other thing that I'm going to be doing is putting a lot more videos out and finding a way to get them onto YouTube, but short videos, informational videos, so people, recognize that I actually exist in this world because, if you lock yourself away, people don't know who you are, where you are, or what you do. So, it's always a challenge. And I think the challenges I've got are no different than anybody else. If you decide to start a business in Geneva, you still have to find a way to get people to know who you are, go to networking events and talk to people. And you can't just say, hey, come do business with me. You've got to start building relationships and things like that firsthand. So I think the principles are the same. It's just the logistics because of where we live and, the business regulations. If we talk about hypnotherapists, in some countries you're not allowed to advertise yourself as a hypnotherapist unless you've actually studied psychology. I think France is one of those countries. You can be a hypnotist, but you can't be a hypnotherapist. So, we've got to find out what the legal ramifications are. I believe that in Israel, you can't even call yourself a hypnotist because it's not something that people, accept, or the government accepts, or the psychiatrists or whoever's in charge of making the regulations accept. So, it's every country's got its own idiosyncrasies, I would say.
So do you have any regrets having set up this business, or would you have done anything differently?
Hindsight is a wonderful science, and I am of the firm opinion that we always might make the right decisions at the time. If we go back and look at it later, we've learned something. It's changed, so we can't look at it with the same eyes. So I haven't made any wrong decisions, What could be a wrong decision has taken me down a road which has given me the opportunity to grow. So I wouldn't do anything differently if I had the same situation at the time. If I was able to take this knowledge I have now, there may be some things I would do differently, yes, but I can't say that because I didn't have that information at the time.
So a question which a lot of people ask is around, who coaches the coaches? So where have you found support and inspiration as you've done this?
There are many coaches around who help coaches. And, I think that it's very important. I was talking to a lady she's actually in New York at the moment, but her home country is Italy, but she was working with some people and they were saying to her, how can you work with somebody if you've got someone who's coaching you? But, if you think of Tiger Woods, if you think of any, Usain Bolt, any major star, any politician, they have coaches. You look at the King's Speech, the movie about, I can't remember, was it George or Albert?
George, I think it was George.
George, yeah. I mean, just before this or during the Second World War, he had to have a voice coach so he could give pronouncements which were intelligible. He's the king, or he was the king of England, but he still needed a coach, and he was still big enough to accept that. So I would suggest that any coach that doesn't have a coach to help them or a mentor to guide them is doing himself and his clients a disservice. And, I've studied hypnosis under a wonderful person called Igor Ledachowski, who I think he was Austrian by birth, but he moved to the UK. And he has done a wonderful job of distilling all the different facets of hypnosis and putting them into a very easily digestible format for the layman. And he's got many, many different training programs, but he has a 2-year training program called the Therapy University. And I'm part of that program, and I've learned so much from there, which, it just becomes the new you. You don't even think about it. You don't even think about hypnotizing somebody. It just becomes the way you communicate. And some of the other students, we get meeting online and we have discussions, and we say, no, it's not hypnosis we're learning, it's communication. It's basic communication skills that we've never been taught as people. Basic listening skills, basic understanding skills. And that's the beauty of the whole thing to me.
So if you were trying to advise someone on how to pick a coach or a mentor, what should they be looking for?
Well, I would suggest the first... Yeah, I would suggest the first thing, it doesn't matter whether it's a business or a personal coach, is it somebody that you can resonate with, who is on the same wavelength of you. It's no good having the most highly qualified coach in the world if you're at loggerheads all the time, because it's not going to work. So that is something very, very important. And then once you've got that rapport, then you need to understand whether or not he trusts you, or you trust him rather, not he trusts you. The other thing I would suggest, because we're not talking about mentorship, we're talking about coaching, is that if he's telling you what to do, he's not doing his job. He should let you make the decisions, or she should let you make the decisions. We can give advice, but it must be impartial. But at the end of the day, it's up to the client to make the decision and find the solutions for themselves.
And
I've got yeah, it's very important. I mean, I've got a client, she keeps on saying to me, what should I do? I said, I don't know. What do you think? And, it's interesting that the answers she comes up with when I put it back into her court. So, I'm not a mentor.
And that's an important distinction, isn't it, between the two, mentorship and coaching?
Because a mentor generally has the experience in the field.
Yeah.
He's been there, he's done it, and he can, give you first-hand advice about how to get around things. But a coach is somebody who supports you and helps you to grow by making your own decisions. And when you make your own decisions, they're the most powerful decisions in the world, because it's your decision. And I've got to, as a coach, I've got to give you that ability. If I'm trying to lead you down a path, which is my path, then you as a client should say bye-bye, because I'm not doing you the service that I'm being employed for. And sometimes we just have to ask questions, that's all. Very, very powerful questions, which get them thinking. A very innocuous question is, if I ask you now, tell me 3 good things which have happened to you today. And you sit there and you consider it. Where does it put you? It puts you into a place of resource, because you're thinking of good things, and the implication is they have happened. Good things have happened to you today. It's a very simple sentence, but it puts you in a very special place. And from there, we can start building, because now you're coming from a positive place.
So if we talk about what you've learned, or what, in this journey, is there anything that in particular that jumps out, something that you could share that others could benefit from?
I think the one thing that really struck me was when I was helping my wife give birth, and it was how much knowledge I've actually got, and I can apply when I need to. And, we're all in that situation. We've got so much ability, we've got so much potential, but we just don't realize, or we never called upon to do it. I'll give you, a funny example of this. When I was living in South Africa, my ex-father-in-law was sat at home one weekend afternoon, and he was watching TV. It was summer, the patio doors were open, and, the dog that they had was an English Bull Terrier, and that was asleep on the youngest child's bed, because it befriended the youngest child, and the dog's there snoring away like Bull Terriers do, And then somebody came to the house and rang the bell. And everybody who knows that family knows, do not ring the bell, because this really, really winds the dog up. And as soon as Peter heard the bell, he jumped up and he was on his way out of the lounge through the patio doors, round there to get to the front door to tell the people to stop ringing the bell, because, he knew the dog wouldn't be too chuffed. In the meantime, the dog had jumped up, and it dived out of the bedroom, and it's on a carpet floor, and it's got its full grip like that, and it's got about 5, meters to go, and then it's got a 90-degree bend into the lounge, and it's a tiled floor. So it took that bend like a stock car, going through a turn, sliding there, and its legs are spinning away there, and it's got a long, straight run right down to the window. And it's going down there full speed. And just as Peter came to the gate to say, stop ringing the bell, the window exploded. He said it was just like slow motion. You could see the bits of glass twinkling in the sun, and he said before the dog or any of the glass had hit the floor, the person who rang the bell, who just happened to be a policeman, had disappeared. He'd gone. He wasn't there. He jumped about 8 meters from a standing position onto his car, because this white missile from hell was coming at neck height straight for him, straight through the window. Now, did this guy know that he could do it? No, he had no idea. But he didn't doubt himself when it had to happen. He just jumped. And Peter said, he saw the guy on the roof of the car, and then in slow motion, the dog sort of hit the ground, and bits of glass falling around it. He looked around and said, I've done my job now, and he just went up back into the house to go to sleep. So, we've got this potential within us. Everybody's got potential that we don't understand. And we've heard stories about mothers lifting cars off children and things like that. And we think, yeah. But, when it happens, you have that potential. Now, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could find a way to tap into that and use it to improve our lives every day? And this is what, my job is, and many other coaches like me.
And certainly that's encouraging for people who are thinking of setting up a business, because very often there's this feeling of, imposter syndrome. Who am I? Could I really help people with my knowledge? And and then there's the lack of support from friends and family, which, is a big thing, because quite often we expect our family, we expect our friends to be, on our side, but they're not, because they have their own agenda, which maybe they're not consciously aware of, but it's there. The situation where you've got 2 best friends, they've been, friends since school, and they go out together every time, and they've got this really wonderful thing. And then one says to the other, hey, I'm going to move to London because I've got a new job in London. And the other one says, London? Just look at all the killings there. Look at this, look at that. Look, it's a terrible place. You should stay where you are.
Why is he saying that? Not out of concern for the other person, but out of concern for himself, because now he's being threatened. His identity, his whole life has been built around them as a pair. And parents are the same. We have this identity that our child's going to be a dentist, but she wants to be a fashion designer. And there's a whole conflict there. So they will do everything to keep this person within their life, within their plan. And, it's a shame, but it's so common, and it causes so much resentment, and it causes so much friction and unhappiness. So that is also a big problem that people starting a business face. And I've faced it. People don't believe me, don't believe you can do it. And it's difficult, especially when you're on your own without support, to get through that type of thing. And this is why we need a support network, and we need coaches to help us get through that type of mindset.
So if you're looking ahead then for yourself, Stuart, what are your future plans, ambitions?
Well, my biggest thing is to make this coaching business into something very special that can help many, many people. I will have to employ people to do that, which is great because it helps people to get jobs who are not self-starters, because not everybody is a self-starter. And obviously, I've got a young daughter and I've got another baby on the way, so I've got to make sure that their life is as good as possible, but not give everything, to them, but let them grow, but be there for them. And that's one of the other beauties of having my own business, is that I can be there more often for the child rather than being a slave to the company. And that's unfortunately a syndrome that is very existent these days. People aren't employees, they're slaves.
Now, to finish on, there's the question I ask everybody, and it's an interesting one, but given that you're a coach, but the question is, if it was your time to give back now, and you had to offer your help as a mentor to somebody, not as a coach, but as a mentor, who would you like to help?
I would like to help someone who is looking for help and is prepared to accept the advice. Because, a lot of people say that, I need help on this, but they're not listening because they're still fixated in their own mind. So that's the first criteria. They must be ready to do the things and make the changes that are necessary for them to grow. And that's not always easy. And, if they fit that criteria, and obviously they're honest and trustworthy and they're not out to manipulate people, then I would be more than happy to help them.
Great.
But, I wouldn't say age or sex or anything else, because I don't think that's important. I think what is important is the mindset of the person, that they are ready to make that journey, because it can be challenging, it can be difficult, and it can be, more than frustrating. It can be upsetting sometimes because things happen, life happens. We have to find a way to get through it.
Great answer. Really, no one's answered that question in that way before, and I think it's great. You talked about the criteria, because you can't help people that don't want to help themselves. I suppose that's the key point there.
Well, that is the key point, isn't it? And it doesn't matter whether it's from a mentor's point of view or a coach's point of view.
Yeah. You
can, there's that old saying, and I've used it so many times, it's almost stale, but you can lead a horse to water, but it's up to the horse to drink. If the horse isn't going to drink, there's nothing you can do.
Well, Stuart, I'm going to put in the links down below, the links to your LinkedIn and also to your homepage, and your main website's called doubleccoaching.com, all one word. And I understand that
Double C.
That's right, yeah. And I understand you've got on there a free 5-step guide on how to boost your confidence. And
yeah, I've got 2 things on there. One is a 5-step video course for confidence boosting, which is encompassing most of what we said already. The other is there's a life happiness or life satisfaction quiz, which is 60 questions, which are designed to take you through a process of assessing where you are in life. And at the end of that, you have the option and the opportunity to get a free strategy session with me. You're not obligated to, and there's no obligation on the strategy session, but it gives you a good insight. I can't even speak now. Gives you a good insight into where you are in life and what you can do and what's working, what's not working. And if you want to talk about it, then I'm here. So that's a very beneficial tool for some people, not for everybody, but for some people.
Brilliant.
The people who are ready, you see.
Exactly, those that are ready. All right, Stuart. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I want to thank you also on behalf of all the people that you help and coach, because I think what you do should be acknowledged. But thanks very much, and maybe let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And, you know where I am. If you ever get out to China, Guilin is a very beautiful city. I can take you to some interesting places and show you, not ask you to taste, but show you some interesting food. But I can also show you food which is, I find, very palatable. So
Fantastic.
you're welcome to keep in touch, and I look forward to appearing again if you have me. Definitely. And if anybody's got any questions, they can reach me through you or whatever. I'm happy to answer.
Thanks so much, Stuart. All the best.
My pleasure. Bye now.